Hello and welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. We'll let everybody get settled in and logged on. So welcome. My name is Laura Craver Rogers, and I am the Education and Outreach Supervisor for the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. And today we're going to be talking about bird adaptations. And we are here at the Maine Wildlife Park, which is in Gray, Maine. If you haven't been here before, I recommend checking it out. You can learn more about it at mainewildlifepark.com. And we have all sorts of really wonderful native Maine wildlife. We got bears, beavers, foxes, coyote, moose, and you can go check out our fish hatchery just down the road. All the animals that are here for some reason, like being injured, orphaned, taken in by people, and they're not really wild anymore, so they can't live on their own. So definitely come check us out sometime. I highly recommend it. A great time outdoors with your family, with your friends. So while we're going on today, if you guys have any questions or comments, or you want to just give a shout out as to where you're watching from, why don't you go ahead and use that chat function. And at the end of our talk today, we'll go ahead and we'll answer some of your questions. And again, if you want to learn more about the park, that's at mainewildlifepark.com. All right. So we are here today to learn about birds. They are one of my favorite animals, and they are very fascinating and they are very ancient. But I want you to think, have you seen a bird today? Can you think of a bird species that maybe you could see where you live or you could see in Maine? There's a lot of different kinds of birds. Think about the ones that run around and they're eating worms, right? Robins. Maybe there's some that hammer on the trees, the woodpeckers, right? Lots of different kinds of woodpeckers. Or maybe it's something like an eagle or the cute, adorable puffins that live just offshore this time of year nesting, right? There's a lot of different kinds of birds. Another one that's really fun, the osprey. They come back up this time of year to nest and they live near water. And one of my absolute favorites, the goldfinch. Nice, pretty yellow this time of year. And you can hear them singing off in the trees. It's a very sing-songy sound. It sounds like they're saying potato chip, potato chip, potato chip. So you can go ahead sometime, maybe not right now, wait till we're done, and you can go out and listen for some birds. But did you know that birds have been on this planet for a very long time? In fact, they have something in common with dinosaurs. They have existed since pretty much around the time of some of our later dinosaurs. And we even have a group of birds that shares a similar name to dinosaurs. Can you guys think about that might be? Give you a hint. If you've ever seen any certain dinosaur movies, they're very fast and have very good eyesight. It's raptors. Here is an example of a tiny little raptor. So it's a bird of prey. This one happens to be a sharp-shinned hawk. And just like our velociraptor ancient reptile cousins, they have very keen eyesight to help them hunt. So any of our raptors, be them hawks, or if they're eagles, or if we have some owls in the back there, we also have vultures and falcons. They're all raptors. And so raptors not only have very good eyesight, but they have very sharp and pointy claws or talons to attack and strike their food. And they also have a nice pointy beak there to eat. Now, birds started to come about because ancient reptiles, they were trying to find ways to get more food and to move around easier and to stay warm. So there's actually a feature on birds that no other living animal has. You guys think of what that might be. Something that's unique to birds. No other animal has it. Frogs don't, snakes don't, dragonflies don't have this. What could it be? Well, I'm hoping you guys were thinking about feathers. So right here is a feather. And if you've been out this season for turkeys, you might recognize this. This is a turkey wing feather. And feathers are a really neat invention, something that came about through evolution to help keep the ancient reptiles warm and eventually to keep our birds warm. And so feathers are very lightweight. They're not going to weigh a bird down if they're flying. And they're made in really neat ways. So if we look at this turkey feather, you guys can see how it's made out of all these different parts, right? I can kind of separate them. Oh no, right? Like it's not going to work anymore. But guess what? If this was my bird beak, my hand, I can turn and I can zip them all back together. And of course, if this was a fresh feather, it would go even nice smoother. And now it's a solid feather again, right? It can catch the air, it can help the bird fly. So that's just one of the ways feathers work. And when birds do this on their back, they're preening, they're kind of fixing their feathers, right? They're combing them, making sure they stay healthy. So feathers, as we know, can help a bird stay up in the air. They're shaped to help catch the wind, almost like a kite, and to keep them going. So this is a turkey feather. We have a few other different kinds of feathers here today. You might recognize these. This is from the red-tailed hawk. So we got some nice reddish tail feathers here, also to help the bird with their flight. And we'll get to tail feathers in just a little bit. They also help to hide a bird or to be camouflaged. So this is from an owl, from the great horned owl. And you guys can see here the nice color of it. Kind of looks like camouflage that maybe you might wear to go out in the woods hunting, or if you're in the military, you have camouflage, or you're playing a really intense game of hide and seek, you're gonna wear camouflage maybe. And so these colors help them to blend in with the trees around them. Now, feathers, we said, can keep you really warm. In fact, you and I probably at some point have used feathers to keep us warm. Where in your clothing or in your house could you possibly have feathers? Because you're probably not layering feathers on yourself to stay warm, right? This is not effective. But in a jacket, right? If anyone have one of those puffy winter jackets or one of those really puffy blankets, they're full of feathers like this. And these are kind of what we call down feathers. They're very fluffy. And when they get together, they trap a lot of air inside. And so the bird is warm-blooded, like you and I, right? Mammals are warm-blooded and so are birds. And so this heat gets trapped against their body inside all those fluffy feathers. And so a lot of different birds have these. Every bird has them. Some birds that live in really cold places will even have layers of fat to keep them warm. But if we think about like with this loon here, right? This loon is swimming in some pretty cold waters. I don't know if you guys have ever gone swimming in early summer, right? Right now the waters are still very, very cold. So we wouldn't want to go swimming right now. But they go swimming right now and they're eating fish. So how do they stay warm? Well, they have a layer of down underneath their beautiful top feathers. It's going to keep them insulated. So feathers can help keep the birds warm, can help them fly, and can provide camouflage. So there's a lot of different ways that birds will use their feathers. So I want to show you here a wing. And I bet if some of you have been, you go turkey hunting or someone in your family does, you've seen one of these before. You can see how big a turkey wing is, right? So here's my arm, right? That's pretty big, but it has to be fairly large to keep the bird up in the air. And turkeys don't really fly a lot, but they definitely can a little bit. So we've got all these really nice long feathers that are going to help to lift them up. And the whole shape is like the shape of an airplane wing. Or should I say an airplane wing is shaped like a bird wing, right? Because who's been flying longer? Birds, right? So lots of different feathers to help them blend in, lots of feathers to help them fly, right? And they can be kind of noisy. I don't know if I can, yeah, this one's not very noisy. If we had the whole bird, it would be. All right, so let me show you a tail here. So here is a beautiful fan, right, from a turkey tail. And we can see the nice band here, the dark colors, and then the nice brown on the outside, right? Nice telltale sign of a beautiful turkey feathers. And tails are used in a couple of ways. So If you go turkey hunting, I'm sure you're quite familiar with the displaying, right? They spread it out and they shake their tail feather around, right? There's another bird that also does this. You probably see them at zoos. They're not really native here. The peacock, right? So feathers can be used to display and attract a mate, maybe with bright colors. But tail feathers here in Maine tend to do a little bit more than that. For most birds, they help them when they're flying to kind of steer the plane, to steer the bird. They can kind of raise them, lower them, and adjust their wing and their tail feathers to help them as they fly. So a lot of different really cool feather options, but some of the ones I really want to point out to you have to do with our duck friends, right? So you might have seen a duck kind of like this one, right? A mallard duck, right? Where do we normally find ducks? Where do they live? They live in wetlands, right? They live in the water. And so when we think about this, they fly in and they land, right? When they land on the water, they're going to want to fly again. So can their feathers get wet? Are they going to be able to take off? Think about when like you drop a jacket or something in a puddle, right? It's really heavy. It's hard to move, right? You get really wet in the rain. Well, if that happened to a bird, they couldn't fly as easily. So our loons and our ducks all have some really very special feathers. So you can see on this loon here, it's very sleek, really pretty, right? It's kind of actually, this one, it's older, so it's a little harder to see, but it's actually really shiny, right? So every species of bird has specially designed feathers, either for camouflage or for use. And if you're a duck or a loon, you are going to rub oils, just like conditioning your hair, right? Get in the shower, wash them, add some conditioner. It's helping to keep them healthy. So just at the base of all duck tails, there's a little gland. And so they take their little beak. This is my loon friend. And they get that oil on their beak, and then they're going to rub it all over their body, because oil and water don't mix. If you've ever seen a bottle of salad dressing, it's kind of separated layers. You got to shake it, right? Because the oil and the water never want to mix together. So there's a fun experiment that you can try at home to see how water and oil don't mix, and how the oil keep the water from going into the bird feathers. You take a piece of paper, or this is a piece of a grocery bag, a paper bag, and use a little bit of olive oil from your kitchen. Make sure you talk to your parents first. Don't just start taking their olive oil. All right. And I'm going to take a paintbrush, and just as if my paintbrush was my bird beak, right? I want to keep my paper bag or my feather here, right? I want to make it waterproof. So what I'm going to do, I'll put my oil down here. If I was a duck, that'd be part of my tail. Is I'm going to go and I'm going to rub oil right on my make-believe feather. Right? All right, so I've got a nice oily feather. It's now waterproof. You might see, parents and people sometimes using a special oil to waterproof their boots. It's kind of the same idea. And now let's say it's some rain. We're going to use some make-believe rain here. All right. And you can see the water just beads up and goes off. Right? You guys see that? It just kind of goes right off, right? And so all the outer feathers of a duck do this. So let's look at what if we didn't use oil. So here is a plain piece of paper. I didn't put any oil on it, right? Pretend this is a feather, like an owl feather, right? Owls do not like to come out in the rain. And now it rains. Well, it's not really beating up as much. It's soaking in, right? So if I was a bird and I was out in the rain, or I was swimming a lot, I would get really soaking wet without having oil on my feathers. So that's one of the really fun and unique adaptations that some birds have for their feathers. Now, owls, and we'll get more into owls later on, but here are a couple of saw-whet owls. We have them here during the breeding season, and they'll migrate further south in the winter time. But owls have very soft feathers, because they want to be quiet when they fly at night. So that's another really important adaptation. In fact, let's bring that great horned owl feather back. Right? Obviously, it's not from these guys. but they're really soft so that way they don't make any noise when they fly. What do you think is going to happen to something that's really soft in the rain? It's going to get soaking wet. So owls, so if you ever came to the park and you saw our owls, they probably kind of shelter under their roof, not go out in the open when it's raining, because their feathers cannot repel water as well as other birds. So some really unique adaptations, and feathers kind of developed from ancient reptile scales to kind of help keep them warm. In fact, we now know most dinosaurs had feathers. So that's just one of the unique ways that birds are very specially adapted. And you can find birds on every continent pretty much, right? Find them, we got penguins, we've got snowy owls, right? We've got all these birds that live in all the extremes of the earth, and then birds that live all over the rest of the earth, right? And today we're just going to use examples from Maine. So we also mentioned that birds have specialized kinds of feet. And there's such a diversity of birds depending on what habitat they live in. They could live in wetlands, they could live in forests, maybe they live in a field, some may live in deserts. And not only are their feathers going to be unique, but they're also going to have unique feet. So while we're on the theme of ducks and loons, let me show you here. All right, this is a rubber mold of a duck foot, right? Is a toe, a toe, a toe, another toe back here. And what's in between them? Look at that, there's extra skin in between. That's webbing. The webbing's to help when they're swimming. And if we look here on my loon friend again, you can see the webbing right there in between his toes as well to help them swim. In fact, a loon is so good at swimming that their legs are really far back on their body, so far back that they can dive better than they can walk. In fact, they can't even really walk on land at all. So that's a really neat adaptation. All right, but other birds might not have feet like that. Most birds that most people see in their backyard or when they're hiking, like this little goldfinch, just have cute little feet to help them when they are perching and landing on sticks and things, right? They don't need a whole lot of fancy feet, but they're kind of scaly. So I can show you here on this turkey. All right, take a look at this turkey foot, right? It actually looks kind of scaly, doesn't it? And so that's to protect their foot. And all birds have some kind of claws. The more digging or grasping they do, they'll have some bigger claws. So turkeys will often scrape in the ground, right? Maybe they're looking for bugs and seeds, but they have big claws. Can you think of a bird that would have really big claws? Kind of gave a clue earlier when we were talking about some really important kinds of birds that were, right? How about eagles, right? So here we have a nice big bird of prey here behind me. And, he has, let me slide over our Osprey friend. He also has big claws. All right, we'll balance him right here. You can see right here, he's got very big claws called talons, and that's to help with a fish, and maybe if he gets a duck to eat, he's going to grip and hold on to them because he's in the Raptor family. And you might see this little leg band. This is from scientists who study birds. It's called a bird band. Biologists put them on birds sometimes. So let me put our little eagle friend down. Here we have a rubber mold of an eagle talon. So this is a pretty small eagle talon, but they are about this size. They have leathery padded feet, long curved toenails to help hold on to that prey that they're hunting. We won't let the loon listen because they sometimes will go after loons if they're hungry. So a lot of different kinds of feet. Let's see, who are we forgetting? Oh, let's look at the puffin too. So puffins spend most of their life out to sea. Puffins are one of the protected, one of our many protected bird species here in Maine. Some of our bird species are listed as threatened or endangered for things like habitat loss. And here we can see the puffin, who only comes to our islands and shorelines to nest in the summer, also has webbed feet. And that's because they fish. right? They'll go out and they'll swim in the ocean, and then they'll dive down and use their beak to help catch fish. Can you think of any other specialized types of feet birds would have to have? How about woodpeckers? I wish I had a woodpecker example to show you, but they actually have toes that can grip bark. So they can climb up and down. Most birds can't do that. So that's a really talented way to go around climbing up and down trees. All right, so let's see. We've talked about unique feathers. We've talked about some waterproofing, talked about their feet. What else is a really important feature of a bird? I'll give you one hint. Everybody needs to eat, right? So we'll bring out our little loon friend here again. So have you ever noticed how pointy a loon beak is? Right, that is a very pointy beak. And what do you think they're doing with that beak? Yeah, sometimes they might use them to defend themselves. One of the many reasons not to get too close to loons, but it's mostly for catching fish. A loon can dive down under the water and stay down for several minutes going after fish to eat. In fact, they even have a red eye that helps them to see a little bit more in the low lighting of darker lakes. And so they use this beak to reach out and grab small fish and things to eat, and then they swallow them whole. When they have chicks, they'll come back up and they'll feed them from the fish that they've caught and swallowed themselves. So that's a really neat thing to do. Okay, so another fish eater who has a different looking beak is our puffin. I recommend looking at pictures of puffins eating fish. They'll go down and they'll find schools of all sorts of small little fish out in the ocean, which is another reason they like to come close to shore to nest. Not only is there dry land to lay their eggs on, but there's also a lot of little schools of fish. And with this brightly colored beak, right, which is only bright during the mating season, they can go down and catch a whole mouthful of little fish to bring back to their nest to eat. So that one's kind of used like a nice gripper, some kind of like pliers that we just hold on to all those fish. All right, another really fun beak, of course, is the raptors. And here is a young peregrine falcon. All right, normally they've got that nice slate color and white, but this one's a little bit younger. And peregrine falcons are another one of our listed species here, and they are protected. And this one actually does have some leg bands too. So this was from a study at some point that biologists were doing to help study the population. But look at his beak. It is a really cool beak that is sharp and pointy. And you might not be able to see it, but there's actually a little notch here cut out in the beak. And that notch is for plucking feathers. Not for plucking his own feathers, but for plucking the feathers off the little birds that he catches. You see, a peregrine falcon flies through the air, swoops down, and uses his feet to catch birds. Birds like maybe a mourning dove, a pigeon. And when they catch that bird, it's very feathery, right? I don't know if anyone ever goes hunting, but feathers can get in the way of the meal. So you've got to pluck it. And so he uses his special beak to pluck the feathers and then rip off little nuggets to eat. So this might give it away, but do you guys know who's the fastest animal on the planet? Peregrine falcons. Cheetahs go about 70 miles an hour. That's like highway speed. Peregrine falcons, when they dive out of the air, they're fast like jets. Or should I say jets are fast like falcons, because these guys were doing it first. They can go over 200 miles an hour when they dive out of the air. It's a pretty fun feature of them. A great way to eat. All right, so another one, and we'll bring back my little puppet friend here. This is a mallard duck. Mallard ducks have a very round bill. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen them sticking their heads in the water looking for food to eat, but sometimes you might see them doing that. And with their beak, they're going along and they're scraping in the mud, they're scraping at the little like snails and things, and they're using their beak to just like almost like a spoon. They're collecting little seeds, little pieces of plants, little insects and things to scoop up into their mouth to eat. So ducks often have that shape of a bill. A lot of what we call our dabbling ducks, they're the ones who stay towards the shallows. They don't go deep like loons and mergansers. And he's looking for shallow things to eat. All right, how many of you have been driving around and you have seen on telephone poles nests, right? You find the big telephone poles and there's a big nest and you see a bird. It's kind of white and brown, right? A lot of people like to think it's the eagles. And I'm not saying you might not come across an eagle nest, but our ospreys are sometimes mixed up with eagles, and they're back this time of year. But they either go to like Florida, or a lot of them go to like the Caribbean or South America in the winter time. But they come back and they're making their nest. And where they make their nest tends to be close to water. Well, why would that be? I mean, he's got a hooked beak. What's he doing by water? Well, just like an eagle, he'll eat fish. In fact, these guys used to be known as fish hawks. And if you see, he's got really long claws, right? Right on his talons, right? See how long and curved they are? Well, think how slippery a fish is. If you've ever gone fishing and you try to hold on to a fish, they can be really slippery sometimes. Now imagine you have to fly in the air holding on to it. Well, you don't want to lose your fish. So not only is their beak designed to rip off pieces of their fish to eat, but their feet are specially designed for carrying fish. All right. And next time you see an osprey, if it's carrying a fish, see if you can see which way the fish is facing. They almost always face the fish forward, so it makes it easier when they're flying, and it gives the fish a view. Just kidding, doesn't give the fish a view. All right, so as we go along here, we've looked at a couple of different beaks. We've looked at a couple of different feathers. We've talked about their different feet. But something else that's really important this time of year is nesting. We get a lot of birds return to this area to nest. We've got scarlet tanagers, we've got hummingbirds, we've got all sorts of different warblers. Even the songbirds that stay here, they're getting their bright colors, right? Because it's nesting season. We hear these songs at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. All these birds are singing. Maybe there's a catbird, you got a mockingbird, cardinals, right? They're singing to attract a mate and claim their own territory, right? Others will use their bright colors to attract a mate to have eggs and a nest. So why does a bird go through all this trouble to make a nest? So here we have a nice example of a robin nest. It's got a lot of grasses in it. It's got mud, right? And generally this is going to be just one season. They'll put it up at a tree branch somewhere, and please leave them alone if you see them. Let them be, because animals are using them. But why go through all this trouble of making this intricately woven nest for your eggs? In fact, check out this one. This one is almost made up of entirely of moose hairs, right? We can see these little threads here. This is hair. We've got a little bit of some grasses mixed in, right? This is a very small bird nest. I'll be up in a tree. Why go through all the trouble? I mean, a lot of animals just carry their babies around until they give birth. Well, ask any mom, a baby is heavy. Babies weigh a lot. And if you're a bird trying to fly around, well, having a heavy baby to carry around is not going to be working for you. So birds have developed laying eggs, right? We've got things like eagle eggs and owl eggs. And then if you want to know how small a hummingbird egg is, it's like the size of almost like a Tic Tac. It's a little bigger than a Tic Tac. And all these eggs have hard calcified shells on the outside to protect the bird, right? But it's pretty fragile. If you drop it, it could break. And just so in case anyone's worried, these are just wooden replica eggs. You wouldn't want to sit here and play with live bird eggs. And so these eggs are designed to have everything inside that the baby bird needs to grow, just as if they were inside their mom. Like for a mama moose, she carries the baby with her until she's ready to give birth. And so this egg still has to be cared for. They have tiny holes in them to allow air through. So do you think a bird egg can go in water? No, bird eggs can't go in water. So if a nest floods, that's not going to be good. If it gets a lot of rain on it, that's not going to be good. So I know my nest is a little bigger than this kind of egg, a little smaller than this kind of egg would go into. An owl nest is a bit bigger. But look, when an egg sits inside a nest, it's pretty safe. There's only a little opening on top, and who fills that opening? Well, this is a daddy bird, but a mama bird would sit right on top. Obviously, this isn't the right matchup. This is a little silly. This is a mallard duck. He wouldn't sit there. He's a boy duck. He wouldn't sit on it. And so the mom can cover the nest with her body. The nest is actually usually no bigger than the mom's body, so she can protect it. Even if it's a turkey nest just on a ground, the mom makes a little depression that she can cover with her body. And not only is she protecting the egg from the rain, but she's keeping it warm as well. So she will sit on that nest for hours and even days at a time. She might not even eat all the time. Every species does it differently. Some will have the male will stay with her, like especially with owls and eagles, they'll bring food, or maybe they'll take turns. Sometimes different shorebirds like piping plovers, you can see them taking turns. The dad will come sit with the eggs for a little bit while mom goes to eat. So there's a lot of different ways that birds adapt, but they all lay eggs because they still need to fly, right? Eggs are heavy, babies are heavy. So it's a way to help them survive. But why do you think the birds come here? I mean, in South America, they could lay eggs there, right? Well, in the summertime, it's really warm. And we know here in Maine, we only get a few good months of really warm, really good growing season, right? Because of that, there's lots of insects and lots of flowers and lots of available food all at once. So that's really helpful if you're trying to feed a whole bunch of baby birds and keep yourself healthy. So we get a lot of birds that come back to the Northeast from the tropics to go ahead and raise their young. So we've gone over a lot of really cool bird facts. We've seen a lot of really cool birds. We've talked about a couple of different types of species, but there's a lot more you can do to learn about birds. So, you could go to our website, definitely recommend it, mefishwildlife.com, and learn about birds here in Maine. In fact, I'm going to let you guys think about how many bird species you think are here in Maine, approximate, because it does change throughout the year. But I recommend learning about birds. Go online, read our things. Maybe go and get a bird guide. Maybe learn about the birds that live in your area. Maybe go for a walk. Take your binoculars, go for a walk, and you want to go find some birds, right? But all I ask is you never get too close. Birds are nesting this time of year, and nobody wants a stranger getting too close to their babies. So whether you're on the beach or you're paddling your kayak, make sure you give all birds space, all right? They don't know you. Look at them from a distance with your binoculars, all right? Especially loons. When they sense danger, when they don't have babies, they dive underwater. But when they have their babies, they carry them on their backs. So they can't escape from danger as quickly. So just make sure you always give them space. But another fun thing is our Maine Bird Atlas. You could help contribute to science by going online and learning about our Maine Bird Atlas in ways that any bird observations that you make here in Maine could be contributed to us collecting scientific data and information about where birds are. So the Maine Bird Atlas is one of the ways you as a citizen scientist with your class, with your parents, or on your own could contribute information to help us study the birds here in Maine. And one of the objectives of this study is to figure out what species are here, where are they, right? Because that's going to help us better to protect them. So speaking of how many species, have you guys thought of how many bird species you think are in Maine? Approximately, it's give or take, depending on if you're talking about summertime or wintertime. All right, there are over 290 species of birds here in Maine. I mean, that's a lower end estimate. So that's a lot of different species of birds, from little tiny songbirds like our goldfinch, to the different kinds of ducks like the loon, to the big raptors like eagles and osprey, birds that live by the ocean like our puffins, and our piping plovers and our terns, woodpeckers and hummingbirds that are out in the forest and the fields. We have a lot of different species of birds, and we're really lucky to have a lot of great habitat to see them in. Now, while you start thinking of any questions that you might want to ask, I want to show you one more activity that you could do at home or in school to help you kind of understand birds a little more. And it's called Bird Beak Buffet. And you can find directions for this game online. So pretty much what it is you can do this with food or rocks or whatever you think safe for your children to do. We have here some rice and beans. You could use sand and rocks. You could use, all different things. Those are just one example. So let's pretend these beans, these dry beans, are bugs mixed in the sand, right? Well, I'm not going to use a real bird beak. That would be kind of silly and kind of actually not allowed. But maybe I went out to eat recently. I went to a nice restaurant. I have these chopsticks, right? So this is my bird beak. And now I'm going to take my bird beak and I'm going to see if I can get one of our beans. Just give me that actually was I thought I was going to have a harder time with that. Look at that. I got a bean and no rice. So the rice is representing maybe the sand and the bean, the bug. So you can time yourself, maybe see how many you can get in 30 seconds. You could also ask first before using them. Maybe you want to try some pliers or something, right? You go I got rice this time. That's not good, right? And see how many you can get, right? Within a certain amount of time. You could also maybe put some pieces of pasta floating in a bowl of water and pretend you're a duck trying to get food out of the water. Maybe use some different kinds of spoons, right? It's a really fun game, and you can find directions for that game online and see how different bird beaks, whether you're a woodpecker or a hummingbird, how they work to get the different food out of where you're looking. So that is all the fun things we have to share with you today about bird adaptations. We're really excited to hear some of your questions. So if anybody has any questions, let us know.
We don't have many questions coming in yet, but we do have one for you. Hoping you can talk a little bit more about birds' ears.
Oh yeah, birds do have ears. A lot of people think they don't have ears. So that is a really good question. So I think we'll bring our loon head back out. He's a little easy to move than the whole loon. So a lot of people think, well, they don't have ears, just like snakes, right? No, that's not true. Snakes even have ears. So here on our bird, we have the eye. And on most birds, let me see if I can move his feathers a little bit here. Right in here, it's not kind of hard to see, but right in here, right behind his eye, there's an opening in the skull, right? Just like your ears have an opening in the skull, right? But we've got a big flappy ear on the outside, right? There's a little hole in there and the feathers just cover it up to protect it. But birds can actually move those feathers a little bit as they need. They do have ears. In fact, owls, let me see, these guys might be a little easier. All right, owls, their whole face is kind of set up to help funnel sound, and their ears are a little easier to see. We'll see if we can point them out to you here. If you follow the side of their eye, right on the side of what we call their facial disc, they actually right in there is where their ear is. It's right, a nice big flap there, because owls do a lot of listening. And so their ears are actually not even either. Your ears are even on either side of your head. For owls, they have an ear that points up and an ear that kind of points down a little bit. That way, one ear always hears the sound first. You can try this sometime at home. You can have someone make sound and do what I'm doing, cover your ears, and then you can see which one hears it first. Close your eyes and try it. It's really fun. But yes, birds do have ears. Yeah, great question. So while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any other questions, I will say that if you do find a baby bird or an injured bird, chances of an injured bird, you would want to call a licensed rehabilitator right away. There's several different ones throughout the state of Maine. But if you think you found an orphaned bird out in the wild, chances are it's probably not orphaned. Sometimes birds will fall out of nests and mom and dad will still tend to them. And an adult, if it's safe to do so, you could carefully pick them up. And if you see the nest, put it back. You want to be really careful about that. You can always call a rehabilitator for some advice on that. But when a bird starts to get a little bit of fuzzy feathers on them, they kind of get like a toddler learning to walk. They're practicing their flight. And so they'll keep kind of bouncing out of the nest and wandering around like their tree or wherever their nest is. And mom tends to follow them around, and mom and dad, and they'll still feed them. So it's like a toddler learning to walk. Sometimes we see baby birds running around, especially at like the beaches. You might see this with baby owls sometimes. And you might not see mom and dad right away, even if there's a nest of birds, because when they see you, they're worried that them flying into their babies might make it more dangerous. So they stay away until you go away. But if you're ever concerned about a baby bird in your area, just give a call to your local rehabilitator, your wildlife rehabilitator, and they can help you out. So are there any other questions?
We do have a couple of fun little questions. You might have to make a guess at the answer, but someone is wondering why feathers are called feathers, and they're also curious if birds have eyelashes.
Those are some really good questions. I'm not quite sure why feathers are called feathers. I'm sure there's a reason why that word came about. With a lot of our different words that we have in all different languages, they tend to have what's called a root word. And so that root word tends to, develop into other meanings. So you might want to, that's a really good question though. I might have to look that one up later, and maybe you should too. So I'm not sure why they're called feathers. They just kind of always seem to have been. And as far as eyelashes go, so birds, some birds kind of have short little, bristles on the end of their eyelids, but they do have eyelids. I'll say that. They don't always have eyelashes, but different birds, and of course, all of these ones are not going to be able to show us their eyelids, but they do have eyelids that can close. And some that swim underwater or are hunters will also have that kind of semi-clear one that can go across that membrane, that nictitating membrane that kind of acts like a goggle to protect their eye, but they can still see through it a little bit. So they do have eyelids. So those are some really great fun questions. Do we have any other questions?
One more last fun question. Also, you may have to speculate on why are bald eagles called bald eagles?
That is a great question. So bald eagles, right? We have all different kinds of eagles around the world. Occasionally in Maine, we do see the golden eagle, though not as frequent. Sometimes our young bald eagles get mixed up with them because they're very brown colored still when they're young. But bald eagles have this white on top of them, right? And so because it's so white up here, that's where that bald word comes into play a little bit. I believe there's a little bit more behind the use of the word bald, but it refers to the fact that this is empty of most of the color up here, and it kind of keeps them looking like that kind of bald look. And then they're nice and brown underneath, so that contrast. So there's a little bit more behind that. I can't recall exactly what it is right now, but those are some really great questions. This is wonderful. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
One last question for you. One of our viewers had mentioned that they'd recently seen, or a few years ago, they saw a great horned owl nest nearby, and they're curious if there are responsible ways to attract owls to your area if you're a fan of them.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, attracting owls to your area can be a really neat thing to do. It can be really helpful to the ecosystem. So different species of owls will sometimes nest in different boxes or on different platforms. And so there's different types of boxes, nesting boxes that you could maybe put up on a tree. Our barred owl, which is the one that has a very rounded head and darker colored eyes. That one tends to like to nest in boxes put up pretty high in trees. Great horned owls, they don't really nest in boxes so much as find old nests of other birds. Maybe it's crow nests or raven nests, sometimes even eagle nests or osprey nests. And they'll take those over. So there are different kinds of nesting boxes. You can even sometimes find nesting boxes, just like you might have heard, for bluebirds and American kestrels. And putting up boxes for these different species can sometimes help them survive better, give them more nesting areas. And sometimes the nesting habitats can get disturbed and make them less successful. So you can definitely find that. There's usually instructions on a couple of different websites that you could find out if you just went online and did a quick Google search, if depending on which kind of box you want. But that's a very fun question, a very fun thing to do. In fact, having owls nesting near you is a wonderful thing because they can help control your rodents. They eat a lot of mice. So no need for any of those the nasty chemicals or anything. You can just use an owl. So it's very fun. I like that.
And one final question maybe for you, Laura. Do we have the great gray owl in Maine? Do you know?
Oh, that's a fun one. The great gray owl has sometimes visited Maine. Now, if you're not familiar with the great gray owl, they are a fairly large owl. They are larger than our great horned owl. They have a big rounded gray head, bright yellow eyes, and they tend to live up a little bit further north, but they're found in the boreal forest. So it's a different type of forest. We do get the boreal forest in parts of Maine, but they tend to live more northern than what we see here. So we do sometimes get them in Maine. And several years ago, I know they have been spotted, and people do like to see them. But just a reminder: always keep your distance, because an owl needs to rest during the day to have the energy to hunt at night. So we always want to be respectful of that. They work the night shift. We want to respect that. But we do get great gray owls once in a while, but not regular, like our great horned owls, our barred owls, and our screech owls, and even our little saw-whet owls. So that's a wonderful question. Is that all the questions, Emily?
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, we want to thank you all again for watching, and feel free to watch any of our other wildlife presentations to learn more about Maine's wonderful wildlife. We hope you'll visit the wildlife park sometime to learn more about the park, or to learn about visiting and plan your visit. You can go to mainewildlifepark.com, and to learn more about ways that you can help Maine's wildlife, please visit us at emmyfishwildlife.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And make sure you like this video and follow us on YouTube as well, because we'll have more presentations coming up, and we'll have another presentation for you next Friday at 10:30. So thank you again, and we'll hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.